Hi Reddit. I'd like to tell you something that's been consuming me for the last few months. I'm 24 years old, and until recently, I believed my dad was a ghost in my life, a deadbeat who vanished when I was 5 and never looked back. That's what my mom always told me, a simple, painful narrative that explained the giant hole in our family photos and the awkward silence whenever friends asked about him. I grew up hating a phantom, a man whose absence was the most defining thing about him. I saw my mom struggle, taking on double shifts to keep us afloat, and that resentment just hardened inside me, making me swear I'd never need a man for anything. It all started when I was finishing up my last semester of college. I was drowning in student loan paperwork, trying to figure out how to make the first payment without panicking, when a thick, unmarked envelope arrived in the mail. It wasn't addressed to me, but to the occupant, which felt weird, since our apartment building had a mailroom and clear addresses. Inside was a single, official-looking statement from a major university endowment fund. The statement showed my full legal name, student ID number, and a jaw-dropping balance of exactly $0 owed. Paid in full. Every single tuition bill, every dime of my 4 years at a private university, covered by something called the Crescendo Trust. I raced to my mother, waving the paper, my mind reeling from a mix of ecstatic relief and total confusion. But her reaction was the real shocker. She went pale, snatched the paper, and just kept repeating that it must be a clerical error, avoiding my eyes and quickly ushering me out of the kitchen. Her immediate, aggressive dismissal of what was, essentially, a financial miracle was the first crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. I knew it wasn't a clerical error. College endowments don't just randomly pay off debts without paperwork, and the account details were too specific to be a mistake. Over the next week, my mother became incredibly defensive, shutting down any conversation about the Crescendo Trust with icy finality. So I took the statement I'd memorized and went directly to the university's financial aid office. The advisor, a kindly older woman named Ms. Henderson, looked up the fund details for me, though she initially hesitated, citing privacy concerns. She explained that the Crescendo Trust wasn't a scholarship. It was a private, anonymous fund established years ago specifically for my education, set up to disburse payments automatically on tuition deadlines. When I pressed her about the fund's creator, she sighed and pulled up one final, heavily redacted document. The only clear, unredacted thing on the creation paperwork was the fund administrator's name, which wasn't my mother's lawyer or anyone I recognized. It was a common name, James M. Donovan, but the moment I saw it, something clicked. A faint memory of a birthday card, a signature I'd barely registered as a child. It was my father's name, the full name my mother always omitted when she spoke of him. I felt a dizzying wave of betrayal wash over me, realizing the money wasn't an error. It was a secret, and the ghost of my father might not have been a deadbeat after all. Finding the contact details for James M. Donovan wasn't easy, but a little strategic internet searching, cross-referencing law firms in our state capital, eventually gave me a name and an address. I didn't tell my mother where I was going. I just told her I had an important job interview. I showed up at the law office, nervous and feeling completely out of my depth, clutching the single piece of university paperwork like a lifeline. When I finally sat down with Mr. Donovan, who was exactly the kind of crisp, impersonal lawyer you'd expect, I just laid out the facts and asked one question. Did my father, Michael R. Harris, set up the Crescendo Trust? The lawyer didn't flinch. He just leaned back, confirmed that yes, he had, and then explained that he was legally bound by an agreement my father had made 2 decades ago to never disclose the existence of the fund to me or my mother. He told me the fund was fully funded and established immediately after the divorce, specifically guaranteeing all my educational costs, from kindergarten through to a master's degree, should I choose to pursue one. The shock wasn't just about the money. It was the realization that while I was growing up hating him, he had quietly secured my entire future. The betrayal I felt wasn't towards my dad, but a deep, churning resentment toward my mother for actively sustaining a lie that made her look like the sole martyr. I left the lawyer's office feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Mr. Donovan had respected the confidentiality agreement, but seeing the genuine confusion and sorrow on my face, he offered one highly coded clue. He mentioned that the stipulations of the trust required him to send annual tax documentation to a P.O. box in a quiet town about an hour north, near the old state park. I drove straight there, the whole way battling the urge to call my mom and scream. When I got to the small town, I found the local post office and showed the clerk the P.O. box number, pretending I was a delivery driver trying to find the physical address. She gave me a sympathetic smile and said, "Oh, that's Mr. Harris's box. He lives just past the park entrance, the little blue house with the big garden." Mr. Harris, my father. He hadn't vanished to another state. He was living a short 90-minute drive away this entire time. I drove the winding road, my heart hammering in my chest, and finally saw the blue house. It was cozy and well kept, and through the kitchen window, I saw him. Older, grayer, but instantly recognizable from the few faded photos I possessed. He was sitting at a table, not with a new family, but alone, meticulously organizing a massive stack of photo albums. I couldn't just knock. My legs felt cemented to the gravel driveway. Instead, I parked down the road and watched, overwhelmed by 2 decades of suppressed anger and confusing love. I spent an hour just observing this man, the ghost of my childhood, sitting there in complete solitude. What truly broke me, though, was when he got up and brought one of the photo albums closer to the light. He opened it, and even from a distance, I could see the familiar edges of my childhood. Photos of me. There were pictures I didn't even know existed. My first school play, a clumsy attempt at riding a bicycle when I was 6, my middle school graduation, even one of me accepting my high school diploma. All events he supposedly missed. He wasn't just receiving tax documents. He had somehow found ways to be a witness to my milestones, taking or acquiring photos without ever letting me know he was there. The lie my mother told had been about his will to be involved, but these albums proved he was watching, a silent, devoted spectator in the background of my life. This wasn't the picture of a cold deadbeat. It was the portrait of a man forced into an unbearable distance, and I suddenly felt a wave of profound sorrow for him, replacing the bitterness I had carried for so long. I finally gathered the courage and walked up to the door. When I knocked, the sound felt deafeningly loud in the quiet woods. My father opened the door, and the moment he saw me, his face registered pure, unfiltered shock, then immense sadness. He didn't invite me in. He just stood there, leaning against the frame, his eyes searching mine. I didn't yell or accuse him of anything. I simply held up the financial aid statement and whispered, "The Crescendo Trust." He didn't deny it. He just nodded slowly and invited me to sit on the porch swing. That's when he told me the full, devastating truth, not in defensive bursts, but with a quiet, broken resignation. He explained that when he and my mother divorced, she had given him an impossible ultimatum. He could either fight for joint custody in a messy, expensive court battle that would financially ruin him and drag me through years of conflict, or he could agree to a clean break and zero contact. The zero contact condition was the non-negotiable part. My mother, devastated by the breakup, had promised him that if he ever tried to initiate contact, she would immediately relocate us out of state and make it impossible for him to ever find us again. His silence and absence hadn't been an abandonment. It had been a terrible, calculated sacrifice to ensure I stayed within a reasonable distance and that my future, financially at least, was completely secure, even if it meant being erased from my life. I drove home that evening in a daze, the full weight of my father's sacrifice settling heavily on me. The lie my mother had constructed wasn't just about his absence. It was about protecting her own pain and ensuring she maintained full control of the narrative, painting herself as the sole provider and victim. When I walked into our apartment, she was waiting, already sensing something was wrong. I didn't hold back. I told her I knew about the Crescendo Trust. I knew about the lawyer, and I knew she had been living less than 2 hours away from him this entire time. I told her he wasn't a deadbeat. He was a desperate father who had chosen financial security for his child over his own emotional well-being. My mother initially tried to deny it, falling back on the old narrative about him being unreliable. But when she saw the steely conviction in my eyes and realized I had spoken to his lawyer, the facade finally crumbled. She didn't scream or cry. She just stared down at her hands and admitted that she couldn't bear the thought of sharing me and that the zero-contact threat was the only leverage she had left to maintain her sanity after the divorce. The truth didn't bring immediate closure, but it created an undeniable chasm-like distance between us, built on 20 years of her self-serving deception. It's been 6 months since I sat on that porch swing, and since the shattering confrontation with my mother. Our relationship is strained, minimalist, and honest for the first time. though not in a good way. She still lives in the apartment, and I've since moved into my own small place now that I'm working full-time. I haven't cut her off completely, but I haven't forgiven the emotional damage caused by her calculated manipulation either. The main focus of my life now is rebuilding a connection with my father. It's awkward, like trying to learn a language you only vaguely remember, but it's also incredibly rewarding. We meet every Sunday for coffee, and he finally opened those photo albums, walking me through my own life as he experienced it, a silent witness from afar. He told me he used to drive by my school during recess, just to watch me play on the monkey bars, a small comfort in his devastating isolation. The most unexpected part of this whole ordeal is the profound relief of knowing the truth. The burden of hating the phantom deadbeat is gone, replaced by the complicated love for a flawed but fiercely devoted man. The Crescendo Trust didn't just pay for my college. It bought me back a father and finally brought the missing piece of my personal history into focus. I still struggle with why my mother felt she had the right to make that choice for both of us, but at least now I know who to thank for the debt-free life I'm starting. What do you all think? Was his sacrifice worth the 2 decades of silence, or did we all lose too much time?